Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Broken Brains with your host, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation, where we look at the issue of repetitive brain trauma in the forms of repetitive head impacts from contact sports and repetitive blast exposures for our veteran population, and what these conditions are doing to the brains of our kids, our athletes, and our veterans, and causing right now the largest preventable cause of mental illness in this country. We reach out to players and advocates and researchers, scientists, authors, whoever is in this space, because this is not taught in any medical, nursing, or psychological curriculum. So you need to be informed to make the best decision for yourself and how to address brain health, how to take care of your kids, and how to help us all make sports safer, because they can be made safer as we move forward. With us today is another amazing guest, thanks to our producer, Denny Caballero, who's always bringing these amazing folks on our show. Love to have him. And we have today Daniel Carcillo, who's our first NHL player to get on the show. Sorry. Mr. Carcillo is a former NHL player, and if they're like Marines, they're never former. Once an NHL player, always an NHL player. And he's a two-time Stanley Cup winner, man, with the Chicago Blackhawks, and a now renowned advocate for brain health and mental well-being, which we always love to see players getting into the space because it's so necessary. He played left wing in the NHL for 10 seasons, earning a reputation as a hard-nosed enforcer, the bad guy on the ice, and is now known for his work with individuals suffering from effects of concussions and mental health challenges. And since he's left the NHL right now, he has been eminently engaged in the space, is helping out other players, other kids, other parents in the space. He retired in 2015, but he founded a nonprofit organization to assist former NHL players dealing with post-concussion syndrome and mental health issues. He currently serves as CEO of Wesana Health, a company focused on using psilocybin-based medicine for the treatment of traumatic brain injuries. Boy, we got a lot to talk about on that one. He speaks at a lot of events. He's a vocal advocate for concussion awareness, and he's personally experienced the effects of multiple concussions, you think, after 10 years in the NHL, and including a diagnosis of post-concussion syndrome, which has led him to this advocacy work. Mr. Carcillo, what a resume, what a reputation, what a career. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, Bruce.
Love it, man. So, dude, where are you from originally? Like, obviously, are you from Canada, Europe? I mean, how'd you get into hockey, man?
Yeah, Canada. As soon as you're born, you're pretty much born with skates on. As soon as you can walk, they stick you on the ice. It was a small town. Everything really revolved around, the community rink. It's called King City, Ontario.
No kidding. So did you have an actual rink, or did you skate on like ponds and stuff like we did in Massachusetts when I was growing up? We used cranberry bogs all the time.
Yeah, we did both. We had the local mom under the bridge kind of dropped the bowling ball and would tell us when we could, get on the ponds and stuff. We had a backyard rink, and then, there's a rink on every corner. They're open all year round in Canada. So it was a meld of those three things.
All right, so you were up there, way up north, where the ice is around year round, or
yeah. Well, the snowfall was pretty predominant. It's definitely less now, but yeah, no, definitely. We're pretty north of the city, and then you get up into Sudbury and North Bay and Sault Ste. Marie, and those towns are constantly covered.
Dude, yeah, I remember sometimes if the ice was thick enough, they'd have the pickup trucks actually go out there and plow the snow.
Yeah. Well, we do the ice fishing. Like my dad had a hut that we would just pull with a snowmobile or sometimes a truck onto the ice. So definitely thick enough for that.
Dude, cool beans, man. So where did you go to school? I mean, where did you play hockey in college, or did you play hockey? Did you just go right in?
Yeah, no, we went right in. So there's kind of there's a fast track system with hockey. I was actually drafted as 16, turning 17, so in high school. And then as soon as I graduated high school, I turned pro at 19. Around like 15 or 16, you have the decision to either go to college or at least start looking at universities, or play in a league called the Canadian Hockey League, which really fast tracks you. And that's where a lot of the scouts were. You're playing against 16 to 21-year-olds, and I went to a few school visits, but I figured, why be behind the eight ball? I thought I was good enough. I thought I was strong enough that I could, break into the league. Maybe not at 19 or 20, but After a couple of years in the AHL, I thought I could definitely get there faster, and no point in going to school and wait until I was, 23 or 24 to try to get in.
Cool beans, man. So basically, how long did it take you to get drafted into the NHL?
I mean, unconsciously, since I started like around 4 years old, when I really noticed that I probably had a pretty decent shot if I continued to work hard and outwork people, probably like at 13, 14 years old, people were starting to take notice. I was never the biggest. I was never the best. I played double A, which is kind of a level down from triple A. There were about 700,000 kids in Ontario alone that were playing hockey. So it was really, really competitive. And I had an opportunity to make a triple A team. Got drafted in the 6th round to an OHL team. Moved away at 16, drafted 73rd overall to the NHL, and just kind of kept making my way up, and just kept working as an underdog.
Dude, so you're in the NHL at 17 years old.
You're drafted, yeah, 17 turning 18. Yep, you're drafted, and then you start going to pro camps, that year, and there's only a select few guys that turn pro right away and get right into the NHL. Typically, like first rounders and second, third, fourth rounders. You got to continue to make your way up through the developmental league, which is the American Hockey League. It's one level down from the NHL. And then you start playing well, and you start getting noticed by the organization. They either bring you up, or if there's a little bit of a pecking order, like there was in my situation, I was drafted to the Penguins. I knew that I was ready to play, and there were just so many guys in front of me that it didn't really matter how well I played. So I asked for a trade and ended up getting traded a year and a half into my pro career to Phoenix, Arizona, and started my NHL career there in I think it was 05, 06.
Wow, man. I never knew how this stuff played, and it's just you read about it, and stuff like that. And I think you're the second professional hockey player I've talked to. I met a guy that played with the Bruins a long time ago, and he runs he runs a sports clinic, and I'm talking about how we can make the sport safer so that people can play the entire time, and retire from the NHL or NFL, any world rugby, and not have brain problems, right? There's a way forward to do it. So in your life, from the time you retired, from the time you start playing hockey, I mean, how many years did you play competitive hockey?
Competitively, the rules were different back when I started, right? We were hitting right at 3-4 years old. So,
God,
I
man,
mean,
yeah.
I started, I'd say about like 25 years, 26 years,
Yep.
because I retired early at 30. And it was because of just the effects of concussion. And I just was really, just affecting balance and hand-eye coordination, and symptoms like headaches, head pressure, insomnia. It was just impossible to continue to do my job. But 10 years is a really long time for to play in the NHL, especially when you fight 164 times, and my job was to get as many hits as possible, and I was good at it, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah. So not only were you, checking and hitting the ice all the time, you're getting punched in the head too, just for that was your job.
Yeah, I was an enforcer. I mean, I was good at the game. It wasn't like I was one of those kind of heavyweights that just went out and at
Brawlers.
the beginning of the game just kind of drop their gloves. I would make, people earn it, or I would go earn it myself. But, it was really used as a tool to shift the momentum of a game to, if you weren't having kind of the best start, to just, you know, show the guys that you were there to battle, and your teammates appreciate it. And then usually the next shift and the shift after that, you start to gain some momentum. And within a game, especially professional sports, there's very little room for error, and so momentum plays a very big role in the bounces that you get and create for yourself in winning a game or a series.
Dang. You ever have one of your coach go, "Hey man, go start a fight. We need to flop the momentum or anything like that."
They say it without saying it. So
It's time.
yeah, they'll never say go start a fight, but what they'll do is they'll change maybe one guy or two guys off a face off, and then the guy that you're lined up with is who fights on the other side all the time, right? You do your research, and so they say it without, and then, like that's, having your finger on the pulse of how the game's going it's a skill.
Yeah.
And I knew that pretty intimately. And for a long time, like I reveled in it. I really liked hurting people. And the only other time that people stand up and cheer is when, a goal scored or there's a fight. So
Good on you, man. I mean, hey, we all got our roles, right? I played
absolutely.
semi-pro rugby for a long time, man, and my role was just stick my head in there and come out with the ball somehow.
Nice.
I didn't even know how to pass. I mean, I played semi-pro rugby for decades. I never even passed the ball.
We just
So
had it's funny you mentioned that. We just had a bunch of UK boxers and some rugby players, and they're going through a kind of concussion lawsuit right now. But we're
yeah, they
starting
are.
to treat some people, from across the pond there, using mushrooms at our center, and we're tracking data, and it's been going well. We just did our first cohort of 8 individuals and some UFC, some bare knuckle boxers, and yeah, we just all met the other day, and people have been, their lives have been changed for the better. So
Yeah, let's get into that in a little bit. So, yeah, no, absolutely, because I want to dial into psilocybin. It's one of the treatments that we highly recommend as part of the legislation that we have in Congress right now for veterans. We're trying to parallel that track for athletes and get that going. So you noticed that the sport was taking its toll on you, and basically you had to leave the sport because of its impact on your brain and physical health. What about mental health? Were you struggling? I mean, obviously you were reveling and fighting. I mean, that's,
if I
sometimes that's just who you are. Other times, the anger, the impulsivity, and the rage come from the damage to the brain that's also done by the sport.
yeah, if I look back on my career, I can see how I was dealing with like a lot of, depression, anxiety, or what could be framed as that. But also, I'm the type of person that likes to use things as fuel. And so, I could also see that some forms of the self sabotage were likely because I was self medicating because of the injuries that I was kind of dealing with that were, underlined or underpinned, just feeling so different. But also, trauma in a big way fueled me, right? I was angry. I just liked the physicality of the game. I liked being able to look
Mm.
at somebody, in the eye and test them, and then have them test me, to see how strong I am, to see how far I'll go. Less about, for the team, but more so just like personally, and I'm still very much kind of like that. That dog is still in me. It just comes out in different ways now, right? In entrepreneurship and that sort of thing. But my sixth and seventh concussion, which were the last 2 years of being in the league, so like 2014 to 15, the symptoms were really really bad. So on top of the headaches, head pressure, the insomnia, the impulse control issues, I was definitely dealing with anxiety, depression, and then suicidality. You know, especially when I walked away from the game, when you're not getting sleep, and then you have all of these kind of things that are happening to you, and you go from being a professional athlete to sitting at home with your wife and a newborn, you start to really realize how sick you are, how slow you are, compared to other people. And I think a big part of that was obviously the brain chemistry and the years of abuse, being so physical on the body and the brain, but then also having no purpose. I think men especially, can deteriorate without that community and purpose. So that definitely happened to me, and it got really scary for a really long time. I've had a lot of friends that didn't make it out, that, CT was all over their brain, and for whatever reason, they just, couldn't figure it out. So I feel blessed that, I was able to find a medicine that saved my life.
So when you got out, I mean, and we deal with this on the military side too, depression and anxiety, mental health issues are very prominent in first responders, professional athletes, and the military, because you spend such a long segment of your life in an environment of let's just say manliness, right?
Hmm.
I mean, whether you're shooting guns, going to combat, you're playing, a sport, or you're saving lives, right? Then you leave it, right? And it's like silence. So we don't know how to deal with silence. How did you take the steps to avoid, some of the tragedies that happen with professional athletes in the same spot, right? And we're talking, almost everybody I know that plays professional sports, contact sports, is hurting. Okay, whether they're rugby players, football players, NHL players, whatever, right? So, obviously you were in a hole, and thank the Lord that you started climbing out. What was the impetus for you to start saying, I've got to do something? And then what led you to the medicine that that helped you get back and become who you are?
Yeah. So 2015, the year started with me having we had our first child. So Austin was born in 2014. The season starts in September, and then leading into 2015, my best friend Steve Monador passed away. He had 19 documented concussions in the NHL, and so I just saw a lot of the same symptoms in myself that I saw in him that we were obviously talking about when he retired and what he was struggling with. And then in March, I had my seventh concussion. And then at the end of the year, we won the cup again. And that was my second. And I just thought that, with the symptoms from the seventh concussion and how bad they were, I still never recovered. I just knew that, if I kept going on that way, there was a high likelihood that my brain was just going to stop working, forever. So I made the decision to stop based off of, those symptoms. And then I went into the medical system. And luckily, like I had all the means in the world to get the best care. And for unfortunately, what I started with was listening to doctors prescribe me these synthetic pharmaceuticals for a number of years to manage symptoms, which then exasperated others. So when I got off of those, I had a couple seizures, which made my situation a little bit worse. And then I started to go to these kind of cash pay neurological stroke rehabilitation, concussion rehabilitation clinics. Started to really learn about the brain diagnostics, and went to these kind of intensive, week long programs. But I could only sustain that for like a year and a half because number one, it was just so expensive. And number two, like the treatments just didn't really take hold,
Mm-hmm.
and so then I started to kind of be resounded to the fact of listening to these neuroscientists saying, well, we've done everything we can for you. So now it's time to just manage these symptoms and live a new normal, which is what a lot of concussion survivors, hear. So I started to do float tanks, hyperbaric chamber, mox acupuncture, cranial sacral, things like that, just to kind of manage the days. And and all this while I was reading PubMed papers. So I was reading anything that I could
Yeah, man.
on like what the new science was saying about any medicines coming out or anything for the brain. And then I came across a study in 2000, I think it was 2017. It was published in 14. It was by Robin Cart Harris, Imperial College of London, of a brain on psilocybin under fMRI. And what I saw was this kind of overactivity of communication with left and right brain hemispheres. And a light went off and said, hey, that might work for you, just based off of what I was listening to from the diagnostics from these clinics and the neuroscientists, et cetera. So luckily in 2019, I took an invitation to Denver, where magic mushrooms or psilocybin was decriminalized at the time. So I knew I couldn't get arrested. And I took a took a really high dose. And before I left, I took some diagnostics. So I took a QEEG, I took blood work, because I knew that if this could work, then there's a lot of stigma associated with it. So I'd need some kind of backup data. And at that point, I was big on this kind of data collection. So I did it on myself, and then I did 2 high doses across 6 months, and I went back to the neurologists or neuroscientists that kind of gave me the scans, and they couldn't find any abnormalities in my brain. And then my blood work was completely clear. And they asked me, well, what have you been doing? And I said, I've been focusing on my sleep. I did 2 high doses of mushrooms. I did, some microdosing, and then I have supplements of lion's mane and reishi and cordyceps and chaga, these other legal USDA certified organic mushrooms that help support, anti-inflammatory benefits of the brain, the body. And they they wouldn't like even look at it, because at this point there weren't that many studies out, but now there's a lot that promote this idea of neuroplasticity, that we got it wrong, right? The brain doesn't stop growing at 21. It continues to, if you introduce the right substances and you have the right lifestyle, it continues to be able to be placid enough to make these new neuronal connections around these dead neurons. So that was in 2020 I really started talking about this, right? And then now we have our center in Oregon open, and it's been it's been an interesting kind of road of establishing advocacy in these centers so that people can take advantage of something that unfortunately right now is federally illegal, but through the states and these adult therapeutic use programs, people can legally come and do this therapy.
So you found this. I mean, you found this path all by yourself. When you got out, where was the NHL on this? Did they offer you any? I mean, obviously, and this is one of my ongoing presses against the NFL and in the military. Like when I retired, 21 years as a Green Beret. Been shot in the face, all blown up. I've shot so many bullets, I don't even go to the range. They bore me, right?
Mm.
But the military does an assessment saying, all right, we find all this stuff wrong that you didn't have when you came in. We own this. And right or wrong, the VA says, hey, we're going to take care of it. All right. And yet, we're talking about a sport where you dedicated yourself from 3 or 4 all the way up until 2015. So before 3, I doubt you had the kind of damage that was found with your QEEG and fMRI when you retired. Obviously, this is dedicated. It's due to the hockey, right? It's due to your sport, your commitment, your passion, right? Was the NHL, did they have any programs or anything to help you with at all? Do you get any medical support or anything like that?
No, I was a little bit like jaded from what had happened to Steve, and he was such a big part of the union, the NHLPA. But once you stop either working for them or paying your dues, if you're not playing, you're not necessarily, I wouldn't say you're not welcome, but they're not going to go out of their way to help. And we all pay for healthcare, and you could tap into healthcare, but the only thing that can be prescribed are these FDA approved medications, right? That we know work, less than 7% of the time and come with these crippling side effects. I think people are waking up to that now. So no, there wasn't much support. I honestly, to be honest, I didn't want their support. We talked a little bit about like these transition programs because I had such a hard time transitioning, and I think they're doing a little bit of a better job of it now through the NHLAA as well. So no, I think once you stop kind of producing and playing for the corporations or for the leagues or for the teams, then you're kind of on your own.
Wow. Okay. I mean, not pointing fingers. What I'm looking at is how do we change this, right? How do we get, people to, or the organizations, the professional leagues to say, look, man, these young men dedicate themselves to our sport. You guys are like gladiators, right? You give us our, for football, our Sundays with our Doritos and our beer,
Mm-hmm.
and on the hockey, I mean, you guys play so many games, dude. I don't
There's
even know.
A lot.
Yeah. How many games in NHL season?
Like 82, and then so it's over 184 days, I think. So you're 40, obviously 41 are at home and 41 are on the road. So it's pretty grueling schedule,
dude. Yeah, nuts. So all right, you put yourself, on the way back, and then obviously, have you tried? I mean, so all right, so let's talk about psilocybin. Tell us about the impact it has on the brains. What I mean, you've mentioned new neural connections and increased plasticity. Tell our members, from a brain damage perspective, from subconcussive trauma, how long did it take you? You said you took 2 high doses. Was that 1 and 1 and microdose along, or what are the protocols that that you went through and there, and what are you finding out of psilocybin? Because I mean, we talk about it all the time, and obviously you're devoted to it. What do our listeners need to know about this about this medicine?
Yeah, so I will say so, and let me just address. I do want to say something just about the leagues and stuff, right? So what we have that we are putting together right now is the first in-human longitudinal observational study with QEEGs, which are the brain scans. We've got microbiome, genetic testing, blood. So we're putting that together. We just did our first 8 cohorts, as I mentioned a little earlier, with the boxers and rugby players and UFC fighters. So that's exciting, and that's something that I think, because there is so much research, there isn't an FDA approved medicine yet, but there is so much that's been done in the way of proving that this neuroplasticity is happening, and how it could be good for not only concussion but neurodegenerative disease through like Johns Hopkins and NYU Langone and some serious academic institutions, that I think if we put together this program and put it in front of the NHLPA, I'm hopeful, and even the UFC, and I'm hopeful either they help with recruitment, or maybe funding. And so that's kind of the next step of how maybe they can get involved. For your listeners, I want to start with, there's obviously 2 different ways to do this, right? That a lot of people hear about. They hear about kind of recreationally, going to a concert and doing, a small dose. But what we're talking about here in the context of healing the brain and the body and the spirit from depression, anxiety, any number of these psychiatric and neurological disorders, is we do this therapeutically. So this is a Schedule 1 substance, so that means that it's illegal, federally illegal, similar to how cannabis is federally illegal. And so with a federally illegal substance, we have to lobby the states to be able to introduce legislation to create what's called adult therapeutic use programs. So there's 4 actually now that are currently available, 4 states. They include most recently New Mexico, which will create this kind of adult therapeutic use framework. It'll take another probably 2 years to get open. The 2 that are open right now are Oregon with Measure 109, where we have our center in Portland, and then Colorado through Prop 122. So they're just starting to license. They just licensed the first healing center. And then you have Utah that actually has medical professionals being able to prescribe MDMA and psilocybin. So that's a legal way through the state to be able to access this. And why that's important is because we focus on a couple different avenues and licenses to be able to do this correctly. So set and setting are really important. So your mindset, and then the environment that you do this medicine in. And what's also critical, and where all of the positive results come from, is this psychotherapy that individuals continue to do, right? So in regards to preparing somebody, we would prepare them and give them these kind of questionnaires about their mental health history and medication, so there's no drug-drug interaction. And then we would, after you're qualified, you'd be paired with a facilitator. So think about this person as a licensed individual that can that is knowledgeable and can sit with somebody through a ceremony, and they will get to know all of Bruce's traumas, why he's coming, because sometimes these things can arise, and Bruce may need a little bit of support during the ceremony. And then I think the most crucial part is the integration of, okay, we've had the ceremony, we've had this kind of cataclysmic event, and it's been positive for not only the spirit but also the brain. And there's definitely more activity happening in the brain. There's an anti-inflammatory effect. Now, what are you going to do with it, right? There's this proven, in nature, there was a study of this proven openness period. So there's 3 to 4 weeks where individuals have the ability that in the ceremony they've broken these kind of destructive thought patterns or perspectives of themselves, and now they've got this 3 to 4 week window to be able to really go anywhere they want to go. they aren't hamstrung by the same anxieties or perspectives of themselves or their injury or the situation they're in. And so they can start eating differently. They can start waking up at different hours and going to bed at different hours. And it just becomes really easy because the brain is almost like a child's brain again. It's placid, right? And so that's what we've proven through a number of different studies, both in animal and in human. So, that integration piece is really important. And this has all been supported by a number of different studies. So, obviously people can try to get in touch, and Bruce, I'll send you some of the information that we have in our decks. But most recently, I'll just touch on this. There was a study done by Northeastern University. About 3 weeks ago, they published this, where they gave female rats mild traumatic brain injury. And people might be asking, well, why would they use rats? That's the first step to doing a drug development program, specifically for concussions. So they actually might make people a little queasy, but they have an anvil test where they hit these rats on the head, similar to a mild traumatic brain injury, for 3 days. And then they gave them a dose of psilocybin. And what they found, obviously, they had this brain damage. They had anti-inflammatory effects that went up after they were hit. And they also had the presence of tau proteins. Tau proteins are these entanglements that basically strangle brain hemispheres, and they're present in Alzheimer's, dementia, ALS, and Parkinson's. Why that's important is after the psilocybin went into these female rats that were hit in the head, they did not have a presence of these tau proteins anymore after the psilocybin dose. The researchers couldn't find any signs of any brain damage, and all of the anti-inflammatory markers that were heightened after they got hit in the head were no longer present. So this study speaks to how powerful psilocybin is, specifically for the brain and specifically for after it has been injured due to impacts.
And that's something, I mean, number one, that's amazing. And we are a huge proponent. I've done most of these modalities myself, part of my research project. And to your point, they're not a lot of fun. I mean, and there's no recreational. When you take ketamine, psilocybin, ayahuasca, there is no recreation. There's no fun about this because you are dealing with your internal struggles, your internal trauma, and getting rid of it in your pursuit of becoming a better human being.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing is, what always bothers me when you start talking about studies and stuff is, how do we keep Big Pharma's hand out of this thing, right? Because they want to turn everything into a pill and charge $500 for something you can grow for 50, right? And you can grow a ton of it, right? I happen to know people that have like mushroom farms, right? They're not making pizzas either, right? So, how do we prevent that? And then the other thing is, how do we control the quality so that people know I'm getting what I'm getting, whether it's the type of mushroom or the type of plant or whatever.
Yeah, so I think that's what's important to highlight about Oregon and about Colorado. So there's 4 licenses. So you can get licensed as a service center. So that's the environment that you would come and do this in. And that's the center that we have called Experience Onward in Portland. But then there's also manufacturing licenses, right? So for the growers of the fungi, there's very specific ways to grow it. And if you don't follow that, then nobody's going to ingest it. Then there's testing facilities. So there's a testing license. So after the mushroom's manufactured, it goes to the testing facility and has to pass those specifications.
Wow.
And then there's a facilitator licenses. So there's these therapists or these people that have obviously been through, a ceremony and several themselves, and now want to, help others and pass this on. So those 4 licenses create the programming. And, similar to pharma, right? The reason they use one compound synthetically is because they need to replicate that compound within a 0.01% variance for millions of people. Think about Adderall, et cetera. So the testing is really important, but we've lobbied for that, right? We've put these programs in place. And so will Big Pharma ever come in and want to run a state-run center? Absolutely not. Why are we doing this first in-human longitudinal observational study? Well, because there's a lot of stigma associated, right, with this medicine that we use, and we want to track data. We want to track data in a poignant way so that we can show people the real-time effect of how this is impacting a veteran's life, an athlete's life, an executive's life that's struggling right now, a civilian that was just in a car crash. We just want to be able to show people, on top of Bruce talking about it, or Daniel, or somebody that just came to the retreat. We really want to back up that with some markers of data, and these are just quantitative, qualitative surveys. But so what we'll get, right, is we'll get this question, well, you're not doing a double-blind placebo study the way that the FDA does, right? And I will say, no, I'm not. But there's also measurements that we're taking that bust through your placebo argument, right? If we know that the brain has more activity, right, and is communicating correctly through a QEEG pre and then post, there's no placebo effect there. Somebody's brain was communicating badly because they were hit in the head several times for several years. We gave them psilocybin, and then now it's communicating correctly. So that's why these studies are so important, right? These anti-inflammatory effects, these genetic tests of the actual age, how fast somebody's aging, because what we've seen across 50 people that have come is that they look younger. Everybody looks healthier, right? And then, tracking the anti-inflammatory effects. So, but these data points, like, I'm not collecting them to sell them to big pharma. Like, that is not what's going on here, right? What's happening is I'm essentially collecting them so that we can, show how important in-human data is to convince others that this could work for them,
Well, the absence of longitudinal data is actually, the largest obstacle to all these modalities being approved, because everybody wants the FDA stamp, and you're not going to get it for all this. And there will be significant pushback by big pharma to anything that can enter their little SSRI, SSNI, and benzo chokehold on mental health. And that's why, we're a huge proponent of plant medicines and their impact. I mean, I've got a friend who was training in special forces, and they cacked off an implosion, and a damn staircase came down and hit him on the head. And when he retired, they did a brain scan on him, and they declared him terminal. It was like, look, you got all these fibrous tangles, you got all this stuff in there that we've never seen before. We don't know where it came from, but you better start getting ready to go. And he found psilocybin, and right now they can't find anything in his head. Yeah. Right. And,
that goes to speak to what you just said, right, Bruce, is like, so one of the hardest things to do is like communicate this to people, right? There's just so much of that stigma. And so if you compare that Northeastern study, right, which was done like via an FDA approved, but that was an FDA approved study. And then you compare the inhuman stories that you just mentioned, and then that individual's brain scans, and then you put those together, and you can show, right, what you're talking about are those protein tau entanglements, and then now this individual doesn't have them anymore. So that's real, and we should be listening to that, even though it wasn't done with a synthetic medicine and it wasn't done through an FDA-approved study. That to me doesn't matter, right? But that's the trick. That's kind of the game, really, that we're all playing, right? Is how to put this into language. And then secondly, a lot of people ask, well, you're not going to be able to publish it in Nature or Frontier. And I'm like, this is not for the scientific community. This is for individuals that have been through the system, that are hopeless, that are suicidal. The number one cause of death after a traumatic brain injury is suicide. And that's who this is for. This isn't for anybody else.
No, and it shouldn't be. I mean, right now, the people that are finding, like, I go to, quite a few ceremonies to observe, to talk, and the people that are coming there have been through everything that big pharma has. They've been through everything the medicine, the whole healthcare system has, and they are done. Nothing has helped them. I talk to veterans that have literally a bag of 15 different medications, and they'll say, I don't want this, for whatever negative impact on their health that they all cause. I don't want this no more. And they're like, well, let's give you more, right? Or let's try this other one. No, It's all about what else is out there. So let me ask you a quick question. I ask everybody that's in this space, out of all the people, you say 50 people have gone through your program, how many of them said that this has had a positive impact on my health and my future?
98%. Yeah.
Okay. Now, yeah. So my daughter's a nurse practitioner, psychiatric medicine, and the drugs that she prescribed, you said have a 7%. She said, Dad, they might help. I have a 25% expectancy that they were going to improve or positively impact my patient. And then yet I talked to, practitioners of ayahuasca, psilocybin, ketamine, HBOT. You name all those therapies that you tried before you found psilocybin. Every one of them has an enormously high level of positive impact on the patient. And so what what we want to work with providers like you is like, say, look, why isn't this enough? When people are literally getting ready to suck on the end of a pistol or run off a cliff like my son, or just think of all the other tragedies that can take place, why don't we allow them access to these modalities that have changed lives in order to save them?
Yeah, I think things are changing. So, and I talk to a lot of my friends of people that like are focusing on kind of the why not. And I'm trying to highlight, like, so Enthea is a specialty network program that is actually working with employers to use their insurance to help people subsidize this type of treatment. It's cash pay, so that's sometimes difficult for people. And the reason that some people want to go through the FDA is so that they can play that whole capitalize on insurance and those types of things. So
right.
But yeah, I just think I think focusing on messaging and collecting this data. We're about to raise funds to be able to put 25 people through this program. We already did 8. And I think that'll go a long way, to showing, and it's not expensive. This isn't a clinical trial to spend $300 million, right? We're talking about a couple $100,000 to be able to show this and show it well. So and you're there's a lot of forces that pull people in, right? And so, but typically, and I think unfortunately, there's so many people that have been through the healthcare system, especially with concussion, that have spent so much money and time, that are so frustrated that and then there's so many stories that already are out there of people positively impacted, that they're taking advantage of this. And I want to be very careful to say it's not a panacea. There's things that I do on a yearly basis to make sure that I maintain my brain health and quality of life. Mainly like a lot of lifestyle things, obviously, and then I continue to do this medicine, once or twice a year. But I mean, it's by far the best medicine I've ever come across, and it lasts, for me, with a good lifestyle and good habits, like up to 6 months. I don't need anything else. I just work out and eat well, and yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Good for you. And we noticed that too with other plant medicines, that other plant medicines like ayahuasca is really good at purging, getting rid of a lot of trauma, so that you can focus on those better lifestyles and better changes. What it does to the brain, I think there's a lot of good positive stuff there, because it hurts. But to your point, is that these are lifestyle changes that are impacting people that had no hope. And if you've got to continue with a protocol once or twice a year, and your lifestyle has increased from a health perspective so drastically that you're back with your family, that's a hell of a lot better than being in the hole that a lot of the folks that we talk to are in. And
Sure.
it's amazing what you're doing. And I would love to get a copy of your legislation. We have a very
Cool.
pro-veteran legislation here. We're doing a study with ketamine right now,
Okay.
and brain supplementation. Ayahuasca
Nice.
was a little bit too far for the Congress down there. Like, hey, dude. But if we could,
ketamine's nice. It's FDA approved. What state are you in?
Florida, sir.
Oh, you are. So
Yeah.
am I. I'm in. I'm in Jupiter. We've been talking a lot about. We have a couple representatives that are actually interested in some form of a possible adult therapeutic use bill. But Yeah, no, let's definitely, we'll
I got a couple
exchange.
for you. I got a couple more for you.
Cool.
And we'll talk about
Yeah.
that because we got funding for the ketamine study.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is work with you to submit your study to the state to go ahead and open that up here in the
Yeah.
state of Florida. They're
Well,
very, yeah.
and that's another reason like why I started the center, right? Is because, there's been over 9,000 people treated in Oregon and nobody collected any data. And the reason that you would collect data on top of this is like, all right, we could show this data in the veteran population to other states, and it'll be so much easier to open up more of these programs.
Hmm.
So, yeah, absolutely. Let's, so fortuitous, I call this a God wink. It's like, yeah,
It's how God works,
um,
man. No doubt,
yeah,
bro.
no doubt.
He's all over this, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
So let's do
that
it.
is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, what you're doing right now, your heart, your passion are all in this, and your selfless service is just nuts. And so it's good. It's good to meet another guy in the battle right now, or another person,
Yeah.
because there's just so much carnage out there, and we both deal with it on a daily basis. And I got a kid for you right now that really needs your program, and I'll even try to help. I'll raise the money for it, and a lot we can do together.
Cool.
So look, tell us how people find you, man. As I close out the show, I'd like to talk about, you talked about studies, where you're at right now, where you're going, and then how do people find out about your clinic, the program? Where can they go to research psilocybin so they understand, number one, everybody, you need to understand what you're dealing with. And then number two, what are the potential outcomes that could change their lives?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking. So I'm on Instagram pretty regularly. So Daniel Carcillo 13. LinkedIn is just my name. Facebook, my name. Our center is called Experience Onward. So website's www.experienceonward.com. We've got a number of different resources there. So all the links to over 150 cited studies from Johns Hopkins. We've got Andrew Huberman on there talking about the risks and benefits in a pretty extensive 40-minute YouTube about the science and everything involving psilocybin. And we've also got a clip from Roland Griffiths, who was the lead researcher at Johns Hopkins. He recently passed away from a cancer diagnosis, but just talking about all the studies that they've done on end of life anxiety in terminally ill cancer patients and depression, and so there's pretty good resources on the website for people to get started. And I have a business line that's attached to my phone that people can text and then email is daniel@experienceonward.com. So if anyone reaches out and they want more information, I've got decks and documents ready to go specifically on concussion and the latest research. So yeah, just reach out through those platforms.
Dude, I wish I would have met you earlier, because Friday we're having the first town hall on repetitive blast exposure, and we've got a panel of veterans and a panel of specialists and modalities that are not normal. I wonder if I could squeeze you in, but
Where's it
yeah.
at?
It's in Tampa. We're
Okay.
having the first, and we host the only repetitive brain summit on repetitive brain trauma in the world in Tampa. It's going to be September 3rd and 4th. So I'd love to have you come out and maybe give a presentation on psilocybin.
Sure.
It would be great. It's a 2-day summit. We got a lot of really great speakers and presenters there. So we'll get you the invite. So
Great.
Daniel, man, thank you so much for the time you spent with me today. What an amazing journey you've been on. God bless you and your organization, and thank you for the work you've done on yourself, for your family, and the work that you're doing for others. And we look forward to hearing from you later on, and we'll have you back on the show for sure.
Awesome. Appreciate
Cool,
it, Bruce.
man. Cool. All right, folks, as we close out another amazing episode of Broken Brains with another just a special guest, Daniel Carcillo. Make sure you reach out to him. Make sure you find him, because if you don't know about psilocybin and you know people that are struggling, I'm telling you, it's one of those medicines out there that can help. And when people at the end, that's why the show exists. Now get out there. If there's somebody that needs help, reach out to Daniel and let him know. By the way, the book, the only book for parents, free on our website. Go out there, get it, give it away, birthday presents, whatever. The town hall on Friday is going to be a big event, as we had to reschedule it because of construction concerns last month. So that'll be the repetitive brain health repetitive blast exposure town hall we're hosting. Do expect we're going to have our NFL seminar, which we're going to open up to NHL players on repetitive head impacts, how to diagnose them, how to validate them, and then how to go back to your providers for coverage. And then what are these programs like Daniel's that can help you get back on your feet. We'll have a seminar for parents. And don't forget, our summit on repetitive brain trauma is going to be September 2nd and 3rd here in Tampa. Amazing guests showing up right now. Some of the top-ranked speakers in the country on this issue, which, again, is not taught in any medical, nursing, psychological course. And like Daniel, you have to find your way, unfortunately, till we get this fixed. So for all of you, thank you so much. Keep your brains healthy. We'll talk to you later. Another exciting episode. And once again, God bless you all. Take care, and we'll see you later.